One call, years of service with the police, and there was one call that I'll never forget. The shift started like any other. 9 p.m. start, and I was in for the long run. It was a cold Monday night, so I expected a relatively quiet shift. After the evening briefing, I grabbed a set of car keys and loaded up the boot with my gear. Our team was low on numbers, so I was single-crewed for the evening. I was happy about that, though. I always preferred to be on my own. I found I always had to put a mask up around others, but on my own, I could finally be myself. I don't know why, but being on my own always put me at ease. Maybe it was because I felt that my heart wasn't in the job anymore. When I started this job, I felt like a hero, like I could really make a difference. Now I just felt like a number on a spreadsheet, a zombie, just clocking in and out, counting down the hours until I can go home. The time went by crushingly slowly as I aimlessly drove the dark, quiet streets. My eyes started feeling heavier and heavier, and as 3 a.m. rolled around, it was always a time where I would have to fight just to stay awake. I was so tired, I even thought about pulling into a quiet spot and having a quick power nap, when all of a sudden I was jolted awake by a call over my radio. "Yankee Bravo 26. It startled me. I didn't realize I had the radio on full volume. I grabbed it and answered. "Yankee Bravo 26, go ahead," I said, eager to get started. The control room operator explained that there'd been a silent 900-999 call and told me all the necessary information for me to reach where the call was coming from. These calls were usually nothing to worry about. 9 times out of 10, they would be accidental pocket dials. So I made my way to the address the call was coming from, and when I got there, a wave of disappointment came over me. It was a block of flats. I called the control room for more information, but all they could tell me was that the call came from this address. I got out from my car and had a look around the building. It was huge. Must have been at least 50 tenants in there. I checked if I could see any lights on from outside, but it was to no avail. I knew what I had to do. I would have to enter and knock door to door to find exactly who called us. I sighed deeply and walked towards the front of the building. I expected the door to be locked, but when I put my hand to it, it opened with a loud creak. I stepped into a long black hallway and let the door slam shut behind me with a bang that echoed down the dark corridor. Suddenly I was plunged into complete darkness. I took my torch out and clicked it on. It came on with a flicker that dimly lit the hallway. I could now just about see. At the end, there was a flight of stairs. I looked around for a moment to see if there was a light switch. There was. "Thank God," I whispered to myself. I tried the switch, which resulted in a pop as the bulb blew out, slightly startling me. All I had now was my torch to light the way, and slowly I made my way forward to the flight of stairs ahead of me. When I reached the top, another long, pitch-black corridor greeted me. This one, however, had doors on either side. I shined my torch over them. They looked old. Paint was crumbling off all of them. I looked down and noticed for the first time how dirty the floor looked, and that wasn't the worst of it. There was a terrible stench in the air. It was awful. It smelled like a dead animal or rotting food. There were always places you visited in the police where you would wipe your feet on the way out, and this was one of them. There were stains all over the carpet, deep black stains. At that point, I reminded myself that someone most likely just called us by accident, and all I needed to do is make sure everyone was okay. So I started to knock on all of the doors. The first few times I knocked on different doors, there were no answer from anyone. I didn't want to force entry into any of the flats. If I'm being completely honest, I didn't want the hassle of the paperwork. I carried on knocking on other doors when I heard a faint noise coming from above me. It sounded like furniture being scraped along the floor. Now I knew someone was here. I climbed up the next flight of stairs and made my way to the flat that I believed the noise was coming from. When I got to the next level, I could see a small line of light emitting from under one of the doors. I made my way over and knocked loudly. "Hello? Police. Could you come to the door, please?" I said with as much authority as I could. I could hear rustling from the other side before suddenly the door began to slowly creak open. I found myself looking at an old, thin man. I could only see a part of his face as he peered around the half-opened door. He was incredibly gaunt in the face and had a long, disheveled beard. "We've had a 999 call from this address. Just making sure everything's okay, sir." He didn't answer me at first. His wide eyes were peering down the hallway, like he was looking for something. "Everything's fine," he whispered. "You should leave." "Why?" I asked, confused. The old man pushed the door shut in my face, and the light from under the door disappeared. I was left confused and unable to react. I couldn't explain why, but at this moment I began to feel a sense of unease. Was I in danger here? All I knew was that I still needed to find whoever made that 999 call, accidental or not. I collected myself once again and continued my efforts in going door to door. I was still met with nothing but silence, and when making my way through the building, the putrid smell only got worse. As the smell became more powerful, I realized it was something I recognized. It was the smell of death. Any police officer will tell you that smell is instantly recognizable the moment it hits your nose. I felt a pit in my stomach. I'd seen death before, but I hadn't prepared myself for it tonight. I grabbed my radio to call for backup, but was met with indifference. All other police officers were at emergency calls. Frustrated, I continued to follow my nose and find the source of the foul smell. As I climbed up yet another set of stairs, the pit in my stomach grew and grew, and so did the foul stench in the air when, without warning, I heard a quiet whimper. It sounded like someone was crying, and trying to stifle it as best they could. I admit I was scared now. I could feel my heartbeat in my mouth, and the sweat begin to make its way slowly down my forehead. The quiet whimpering continued. "Who's there?" I called out, with a slight nervous crack in my voice. The crying suddenly stopped and left me in complete silence. I stood completely still for the longest time, listening out for any more noises. All I could hear now was the occasional whistle of wind coming from outside. I pointed my torch in front of me, and what I saw terrified me. Black stains everywhere, all over the walls and the floor. The way the stains were formed, I knew it had to be blood. I grabbed for my radio once more and my heart sank. My radio was dead and my spare battery was in my car. "Shit," I whispered to myself. In my tiredness, I had got seriously complacent. I turned around to face the stairwell, and I was just about to make a run for it back to my car when there was another sound, heavy breathing coming from behind me. It was only just loud enough for me to hear it. I quickly turned around, shining my light down the hallway. The breathing stopped, however, and I noticed that one of the doors was opened. It wasn't before. Someone must have opened it while my back was turned. Every fiber in my body was telling me that I should turn around and get back to my car, but a part of me had to know what was in there. I unclipped my baton from my belt and extended it. There are no guns in this country, so all I had to defend myself was my baton and standard issue pepper spray. I came to the open door, and the smell was unbearable. I knew it was coming from this room, and as I stepped inside the flat, I found a light switch next to me and flicked it on. I'll never forget what I saw. There was blood everywhere. The walls, the floor, the ceiling, and more bodies than I'd ever seen in my life. They were all naked and strung up like pigs in a slaughterhouse. They were emaciated and pale grey. Some looked as if they'd been there for months, and some looked like they'd only just been strung up. My breath quickened as I slowly backed out of the flat, into the corridor. Suddenly, I heard the sound of someone laughing. It was an incredibly low pitch, almost sounded edited. I couldn't pinpoint where exactly it was coming from, but it was getting louder and louder, finally causing me to lose my nerve. I broke out into a sprint, making my way as fast as I could down the staircase. I could feel someone was right behind me as the laughing persisted. The stairs felt as if they would never end until, to my surprise, I ran into the old man from earlier. He grabbed my arm tightly and pulled me. "Follow me," he said in a hushed tone. I did without question. I was too panicked to answer, as he led me quickly to his flat. When we arrived, he hastily locked the door behind him. "What the fuck was that?" I shouted, out of breath. "Shh," the old man said, with his ear to the door. "Sit down," he whispered. I sat down on his sofa, shaking. All my training, my years of experience seemed to just disappear. I didn't know what to do. "I'm sorry," the old man said, turning to face me. "It's my fault you're here." "What do you mean?" I whispered back. "I'm the one who called you." I was lost for words. I didn't understand what was happening. It all felt like a twisted nightmare. The old man slowly walked over and sat in a dusty armchair across from me, and he began to speak again. "I don't care if you believe this or not, so I'm going to tell you anyway." He took a deep breath. "That thing up there, whatever it is, it ain't human. Every few months it comes out and it feeds. I called you when it started happening again tonight, but I couldn't speak. Whatever it is, it knows your thoughts. It senses you. If you try and leave, it will know." I was obviously terrified and confused at what he was saying. I thought to myself that maybe he was crazy. However, I'd been in the job long enough to know when someone was lying, and I could see in that man's eyes that he was telling the truth. I continued to sit in silence as he started to speak again. "It's always the same. Every few months it takes some of us into that room, and they never leave. The next morning some people come clean up after it, and just like that, the flats are back up for rent. I only moved here because the rent was cheap." He chuckled to himself. "Now I know why," he sighed. "It knows to pick the ones people won't miss as well. It's like it can read your mind. It gets in your head. I don't know why it's never picked me, but I do know that anyone who tries to leave or tries to find help ends up in that room. So what the hell do we do?" I said, still panicked. Suddenly the old man was interrupted by 3 loud knocks on the door. We sat staring at it, not moving as the doorknob started to rattle. "Don't move," the old man whispered. I couldn't move anyway. I was frozen. Whatever was on the other side of the door was getting more and more desperate to get in, until the banging and the rattling ceased all at once. "Honey, please let me in," the voice said from behind the door. It was my wife's voice, as clear as day. What the hell was she doing here? "That's my wife," I said, standing up. "No, it's not. Do not let it in." I made my way to the door just to peer out of the peephole. There she was. She looked scared, and she was crying. She peered through at me with deep sadness in her eyes. You see, my wife had been missing for 2 years. I'd just about given up hope, but there she was, as clear as day, begging me to let her in. The old man jumped up and grabbed me, desperately trying to stop me from opening the door, but I easily overpowered him. I knocked him back with my elbow and began to unlock the door. "Babe, get in here," I shouted, as I unlocked the bolt and swung the door open. The old man was right. Standing in front of me was something truly horrifying. It wasn't my wife. Its body was thin and tall, its arms long, almost touching the floor. Its skin was pale blue, and its veins were red. Its mouth was just a small hole in the middle of its face, and it had no eyes. It quickly cocked its head from left to right, seemingly looking between me and the old man. Each time its head moved, a sickening crack of its neck would follow. "You fucking idiot," said the old man. "You gave it permission." Suddenly, with great speed, the creature pushed me aside and leapt towards the old man. It all happened so quickly, and in a flash, the creature had grabbed him by the leg and pulled him out into the corridor. His screams echoed down the hallway as he and the creature disappeared into the darkness. I stood in fear as the screams continued. That thing was torturing him up there, I knew it. I put my hands over my ears. I couldn't bear to hear it anymore. I had to get out of here. The old man's screams continued to echo through the building. For a while I was unable to move, unable to think. I was too afraid. However, I remembered my duty. I remembered why I joined the force all those years ago, before life and the job had ruined me. I was supposed to protect. That was my job. So I steadied myself once more and made my way upstairs through the oppressive dark, the familiar stench guiding me to that room of horrors. I made it to the floor where the room was and shined my torch down the hallway. The desperate screams of the old man had stopped now. I knew I was too late, but I made my way forwards anyway, and as I got closer I heard a faint crack. It was that thing moving. I snuck closer. Now I could hear the sound of it breathing. I creeped even closer until I was almost at the entrance to the room when I noticed a hand slowly reaching around the door. I stopped and waited, staring at it, its long claws tapping rhythmically against the door frame. That's when the laughter started once more. It was louder this time, and I felt as if the sound was coming from deep in my mind. "He's gone, I'm afraid," a voice said. The voice felt like it was right next to my ear, causing me to flinch. It continued to talk to me. I was frozen, almost like it was controlling my movements. "We can help each other. We could be friends," the voice carried on. It slowly stepped out of the hallway, revealing itself to me once again. Slowly it turned its head towards the room. "You know it's your fault he's dead." The voice in my head was so painful to listen to. It felt like pins being pushed into my skull. "Just like your wife," it said, laughing. "Maybe if you hadn't been so obsessed with work, taking the extra shifts, only ever thinking of yourself, you might have been there to stop it happening." The pain was unbearable now, unlike anything I had felt before, but despite the pain, I managed to remember something the old man had said. It knows who won't be missed. This means it must have selected its victims so it won't be caught. Maybe, just maybe, I could turn around, ignore it and walk out. Could it be as simple as that? I thought to myself. I took a step backward, and with a sharp crack, the creature swung its head towards me. I turned my back on the thing as it continued to torment my mind, but my will was set. I walked forward, all the time hearing its grotesque body moving behind me. It was so close I could feel its warm breath on my neck. It kept talking to me, describing all the ways it would torture me, but I persisted. In all my fear, I knew one thing. The creature wasn't trying to stop me. I was right. As I got closer, something happened then that I didn't expect. The thing started to get desperate, begging me to stay. "I can help you," it spoke. "You could live forever. I did it for the piece of shit that owns this place. I could do it for you. Fame, money, whatever you want. It could be yours." I found its desperation oddly comforting. I felt like I'd beaten it, and just like that, I found myself at the exit. As I opened the door, I heard it scurry back up the stairs behind me, but not before it left me with one more voice in my head. "I know you now. I'll find you anywhere you go." I stepped outside, slammed the door, and breathed a sigh of relief. I sat in my car for a while, trying to process if anything I had seen was real. I knew there was no one in the whole police force who would believe me. I contemplated on what I would say for a while, before putting the spare battery from my car into the radio, and as soon as I did, a voice loudly called out, "Yankee Bravo 26, update please." I sat for the longest time, as they repeated the same phrase over and over, before finally bringing my radio up to my mouth. "Pocket dial," I said. Detective Martinez dragged on his filter-tip cigarette, watching the fiery cherry rapidly descend to the orange paper. He heaved a deep sigh on the exhale, regretting having to work into the wee hours. The spent cigarette tumbled from his hand, landing on the wet tarmac with a fizz. He reached inside his raincoat and withdrew a fresh pair of surgical gloves. Snapping them onto his hands, the odor of latex billowed up. 1:45 a.m., the detective said into his dictaphone. "Pinevale Road. Rail crossing. Vehicle discovered. South side of the tracks. Bloody Mary, Bloody Mary," the two brothers chanted into the bathroom mirror. They held their breath, a pregnant pause before finishing off the ritual. Bloody Mary. The room was very dark, the only light coming from a plug safety bulb, just enough for the brothers to make out their faces, reflected back to them. Josh, Ben's younger brother by a clear 6 years, strained his eyes as he searched the mirror for Bloody Mary. He stared at his doppelganger with a morbid hope his face would change to that of a haggard crone or a bloody ghost. His heart raced. "I thought you said something was going to happen," Josh said, pouting, turning to look at his brother. Ben kept his eyes locked on the mirror. It will. Trust me. Just keep looking," he gasped. Josh watched as his brother's face contorted with terror. What? Josh returned his gaze to the mirror, frantically scanning their reflections for something that would freak his brother out. Then he saw it. There it was. A third face, pupilless eyes hopelessly gazed into the abyss, wrinkled skin that appeared leathery to the touch. A mouth open in a silent moan, the scraggly straw-like black hair. The crone, Bloody Mary. Josh drew his hands to his face in utter horror and screamed, a scream so piercing it would have fitted the apparition more than a 13-year-old boy. The low moans of the monstrous hag cut through his shrieks, scaring him further. He felt his body numb as he panicked, tears beginning to gather in his eyes as his fright peaked. With a click, the lights went on. "Happy Halloween, little bro," Ben said, bursting out laughing. Shaking the rubber Halloween mask in his brother's face, Josh lowered his head, his lip quivering. His reddened eyes appeared lost, his young mind trying to come to terms with the act of deception. Ben caught the devastated look on Josh's face, and his smile disappeared. "Oh, Josh, I'm sorry. I thought it was going to be a bit of fun," he said before hugging his still shivering brother. The door opened wide as Andy, Ben's friend, swung into the room, holding onto the frame. "So he fell for it then?" he said, grinning. "Fuck off," Ben mouthed over Josh's shoulder. Andy rolled his eyes and exited the room. "So they are asking me to believe that the guy just lies still for the whole movie? Doesn't fart, cough, or sneeze," Ben said, remonstrating with the TV. "It would have been quite a different film if he had farted." "Shush, this is my favorite part." The two of them watched intensely as Cary Elwes's character steeled himself before savagely soaring through his own ankle. Ben beamed. "I like this because he feels so helpless. He makes the horrifying decision to amputate his own foot, which in the end is futile. Look at the hope in his eyes," he pointed, sitting on the edge of his chair. "Hope makes people do insane things. Do you think he would do that if there was no obvious route of escape? That's what makes it so good. And when the hope is finally taken from him, all the more enjoyable. He continued to smile, leaning back in his chair. Sometimes, mate, you scare the shit out of me, Andy replied, clearly disturbed by the conversation. Oh, relax. Oh, hey, Ben said, seeing his brother at the bottom of the stairs looking sheepish. Are you feeling any better now, buddy? He nodded slowly, that slow nod kids do when trying to recover from humiliation. Any wrong words would send him running back up the stairs. Do you want to come and watch the rest of the film with us? Are you sure that's a good idea, Ben? Sure it is. It's Halloween. The parents are away. What better thing than to show an impressionable teenager some of Jigsaw's twisted games? Andy shook his head. Josh sat on the floor, just feet from the TV. Say, Squirt, are you still up for going to the Magic Road tonight? He nodded again, not turning, not taking his eyes off the TV. Ben checked his watch. It was 11:15 p.m. If they were to get there for midnight, they'd need to leave soon. The detective scribbled in his small notebook. Raindrops painted the paper infrequently as the last of the storm clouds left the area. Were there any signs the driver was under the influence? It was raining heavily when I got to the scene. Any possible tire tracks were already gone, Sheriff Jones responded, standing on the side of the road, well away from the train tracks and the car. Any sign of a struggle? No, sir. It appears the car stopped with some composure. Martinez approached the car and reached for the handle. It's locked, Jones said. The car jostled, the suspension doing its best to keep the vehicle steady on the uneven, dirt roads that led to their destination. Ben dipped the headlights as he saw lights approach from the opposite direction. So you looking forward to this, Josh? Andy asked, turning his head. Josh nodded again slowly, but his mind seemed elsewhere. He stared out of the side of the car into the darkness beyond. Is this really how we are going to spend our Halloween? Andy asked Ben in a hushed tone. I'm sorry I have to babysit tonight, but you knew the deal before you came over. Who knows, this could be fun. Andy scoffed. You know it's an optical illusion, right? What? The Magic Road? Yeah. I guess some of them are, but this one is different. I guarantee you, if we stop the vehicle and it moves on its own, it's going downhill. It's basic physics. Basic physics for a real road. Not a magic road, Ben said, smiling and winking. Taken aback, Andy inquired, Are you winding me up? You can't possibly believe that there's such thing as a magic road. Haven't you heard the local legend? The one where ethereal children push a stalled car off the tracks just in time, as an approaching train thunders past. That's what they all say, ethereal children. Do you know how stupid you sound? I'm just saying, them's the stories. Well then, how do you explain the number of people whose cars were not whisked away by fairy children and get hit? Ethereal children. Whatever. What happened to them? Maybe they just wanted to die, so the children didn't save them. You have clearly lost it, Andy said, while shaking his head. Come on, Ben conceded. It's just a bit of fun. Where's your sense of adventure? Ah, we're almost here. The car came to a halt at the stop sign of the T-junction. The roads had been dead. Only one car had passed them on the whole journey. The car pulled onto the tarmac of the main road. It almost sighed with relief at the smooth surface. A railway crossing sign lit up brightly, reflecting the light from the headlamps. We're here, Ben said, slowing the car, parking directly on the tracks. He got out, the cool October air chilling his face. The beginnings of a rainstorm dotted his face. He pulled up his hood and plunged his hands into his pockets. Looks like it's starting to rain, Andy said, poking his head out of the window. Do you mind if I stay in the car? Do what you want, mate. Ben checked his watch. He made it 5 minutes before a train could arrive. The detective grunted, reaching for his wallet. He rifled through the credit cards and store cards, looking for the most useless one among them. He pulled out his gym membership card, still as pristine as the day he was issued it. "I knew this would come in handy someday," he joked, as he poked the card through the gap of the door. Fishing for the unlock mechanism, he winced, visualizing his movements with a mental picture of the internal system. Click. "Aha," he exclaimed. "And my wife said, 'Why join a gym? You'll never use it.'" The detective opened the door, leaned in and paused. Sheriff?" "Yes." "Did you look inside the car?" "No, sir. Like I said, it was locked." "Did you shine a flashlight around it at least?" "No," Jones said, confused. Martinez stood upright silently, shaking his head. He punched in some digits to his phone. "Fucking rural motherfuckers." "Excuse me," the sheriff said defensively. "Hi, yes, Detective Martinez. I need a forensic team now. Yes, I know it was for an abandoned car. 20 minutes, thank you." He put away his phone and sparked another cigarette. Fucking amateurs. On the horizon a light flickered, a bright white light, becoming more steady as the train that it was attached to approached. "Here we go," Ben said, getting back in the car. He put the key in the ignition and closed the electric windows. After withdrawing the key, he opened the door and threw the keys into the bushes behind them. "What the fuck are you doing?" "Gotta make it realistic, don't I?" Ben released the parking brake. "Are you fucking crazy? Go get the keys." "Calm down, the train is miles away yet." "Train? What fucking train?" "That one," Ben said, pointing out of Andy's window. His jaw dropped at the sight of the bright, glowing object drawing nearer. "This isn't fucking funny, man. Open the fucking doors," he said, frantically pulling on the handle that just flapped in his hands. "No, you said it was all physics, nothing else. Open the fucking door." Josh began to cry, "Make them stop, make them stop." "Andy, calm down. You're upsetting Josh." "Make them stop," he bawled, clutching his hands to his ears. "Make who stop?" "Open the fucking doors," Andy interrupted, leaning over Ben to get to the central locking. The button impotently depressed, lacking the power to activate the mechanisms. The rain began to lash down. The storm that had been brewing had erupted. The voices, they sound scared. "What voices? I don't hear anything." "You win, Ben. You fucking win. This is a magic road. Now unlock the damn doors." "Shut up. Josh is trying to tell me something," he responded. "The children's voices." Ben turned around in his seat to look at his brother. "Ha! I fucking told you. Didn't I fucking tell you?" he cried out, pushing Andy on the shoulder. The beacon of the approaching train began to brighten the interior of the car. "If you have a punchline to this joke, now would be a good fucking time." Ben laughed, cupping his hands on the rain-covered window. "It's working! It's working! Make them stop!" Josh continued to lament, lying down on the seat in clear agony. "What the hell is happening?" Andy said, shocked, watching as the car began to roll off the tracks. "It's too late. We're not going to make it," he said, pinching his eyes shut. The locomotive's horn blared out, warning the car of its impending collision. Andy braced himself, imagining the car's integrity giving up instantly on impact. At least it would be quick, he thought, before a certain calm washed over him. "Woohoo," Ben said with delight. "What a fucking rush." With trepidation, Andy opened his eyes one by one, ducking, as if he was worried the sky would fall. "You're a fucking asshole. A fucking asshole. You realize that?" The rain continued to lash the car, but Ben didn't reply. His face was that of shock. He was looking at his brother. Andy turned to look at the subject of his friend's terror. Oh shit. When the forensic team arrived, one sleep-deprived, angry man got out of the car. He retrieved his kit from the back seat. Where do you want it, boss? Look for prints on the back of the car, Martinez replied. I'm not sure how successful we'll be. It's rained a lot, he replied, wishing he was still in bed. Just do it, Dan, the detective replied, taking out another cigarette. Hey, boss, the forensic guy shouted. Did you find something? He replied, walking over to the crime scene, with the unlit cigarette protruding out of the side of his mouth. Nothing. Nothing? You did say you might not see anything. Some partials around the handle, but they're too degraded. Otherwise completely clean. No one's touched this tonight. What's the inside of the car look like? 3 bodies, all male, 2 in their late teens, early 20s, one around 12, 13. They approached different sides of the car, each slipping on new latex gloves. Lacerations on the neck, on both bodies. Looks like the main cause of death, Dan said out loud, examining the body closest to him while comparing identical wounds on the other. Bruising on the shoulders suggests they were held back, probably before their necks were sliced. He stopped. Confusion took over his face. What the hell? He unclipped a small tall torch from his belt and shone it on the bruises. The contusions are too small for adult hands. They appear childlike. They gazed at each other before turning in unison. To the child in the back seat, he sat there motionless. He had bled from the ears his eyes were shut. Hey kid, you there? Martinez asked. Yo kid? Do you think he did that? Inspecting the boy's hands, Dan replied. His hands are a match, but I can't see him overpowering both of them on his own. This is fucked up, the detective announced, standing up again to light his cigarette. Hang on, boss. I think he's breathing. Who? The kid. Sheriff, get him out of there, Martinez demanded. You've left him in there with dead bodies. If you don't get fired for this. He trailed off. The embarrassed sheriff scuttled over to the car, opening the unlocked door. Hey, buddy. I'm a police officer. I am here to help you. Do you know the names of your mommy and daddy? The child did not respond. He spotted the blood from the little boy's ears. Can you hear me at all, son? The boy said nothing. Okay, the sheriff said, raising his voice, but trying hard not to sound threatening. I'm going to lift you out of the car. Is that all right? The boy remained silent. As carefully as he could, Jones put his hands under the boy's legs and back and gradually slid him out of the car. It's going to be okay, boy. What's your name? But there was no response. I'm going to take him back to the station, he said to Martinez, holding the child on his arms. First thing you've done right all night, Sheriff. The detective watched the small-town sheriff put the boy in the back of his patrol car. He turned back to Dan, who was back in the car looking over the bodies. The rain had receded, replaced by clearing skies and ice-cold wind. He looked up at the stars, as if looking for some reason why this had happened. When he looked back down, the patrol car was disappearing into the distance. A dance music beat erupted from Martinez's pocket. He pulled out his phone. What is it? The boy, he's speaking, the sheriff said. I'll put you on speakerphone. Say it again, boy. It was the children, the boy said, almost in a trance, quiet and faint, but loud enough for the detective to hear it over the phone. What was the children? Jones asked. They did it. Did what? Kill your friends? The boy nodded. What children, son? We didn't see any. The ones that pushed the car. Pushed the car off the track. Were you stuck? The boy nodded. They said... He went silent. What did they say? The detective pushed, consciously turning away from the road to look him in the eye. Martinez was fixated on his phone, mouth slack with alarm. They said they shouldn't have tested them. They said they needed to be punished. The boy began to cry. They told me to get out of the car, but I couldn't. Their voices hurt too much. That's why they gave me this. He took a blood-stained knife from his coat. Boy, that's a big knife. Can you put it somewhere safe? The sheriff asked, his voice breaking. The voices, are they still there? The boy nodded. Sweat gathered on the sheriff's brow, a cold sweat that numbed his skin. What are they saying? Tears rolled down his cheeks. I don't want to tell you. You're safe now, son. You can tell me. I can't. Why not? The boy looked away timidly. They are talking about you. Jones gripped the steering wheel tightly, looked dead ahead, only taking his eyes off the road to look at the child in his rear-view mirror. Nervously, he asked, What are they saying about me? They say you should have taken me out of the car earlier. They say that no child should see that. They say you need to be punished. Martinez couldn't believe what he was hearing. Sheriff Jones, stop the car. Stop the fucking car. But he did not listen. Don't say things like that, son. That's not nice. The detective listened to the phone, watching the tail lights of the police car almost disappear out of view. They have a message for you, the boy said. What's the message? The sheriff said, with a wobble in his voice. Happy Halloween. The sounds of gurgling and spluttering were sent through the phone line as the detective watched the patrol car swerve off the road. The line went silent. Sheriff, sheriff. Martinez shouted down the phone, but he could hear were the sounds of children laughing. The West Side Bank has 3 exits, 30 windows and 19 air vents, and when I arrived at the scene, there were 13 people being held captive by a man with a vendetta. How bad are things? I asked the officer in charge. So far no one had been hurt, but I knew that would change quickly if I didn't start talking to the terrorist. The task force is small. Stuff like this doesn't happen every day to them. I can tell they are scared. I sat down, placed the headpiece on and turned on the mic to chat with a psychopath. To whom am I speaking? My voice was calm and firm. I wanted to show that I was ready to talk as long as necessary. The line was quiet for a moment, and then a voice repeated my question word for word. To whom am I speaking? It was a man's voice. He sounded older. There was a nervous and emotional edge to the way he spoke. He was unsure about how this was going to play out. Special Agent Dennis Lassiter, I replied, back. Another pause. Have you done this for long, Special Agent Dennis Lassiter? He quipped. There was a bit more confidence in his voice this time. 7 years. How about you? I wanted to show this son of a bitch I was ready to tangle. No, never. But there's a first time for everything, isn't there? There doesn't have to be. After all, we're talking right now. Just fine. So I think we can come to some sort of agreement, I told him. This was basic procedure. Actively listen. Find out what the kidnapper wanted. There was a longer pause. You married Dennis? That took me by surprise. I hadn't heard from Kristen in a while. Things had become strained. Divorced, you? I kept my voice steady. I wanted him to get comfortable with me. Same. Wasn't my choice, really. Job never can make ends meet. Now we were getting somewhere. That sounds difficult, stressful. I can imagine it would only make sense for you to do what you are doing. I needed to build rapport. Get him to trust me. Everything fell into place when Michael died, he explained. From the way his voice cracked, I could tell that had to be his son. How old was he? 5. It was a car accident that took him from me. After that, life just had no meaning anymore. I've always wanted a son. He was in pain, and I understood it. It sounds like you've been planning this for quite a while now. 4 years, but it was mostly a waiting game, because I remembered every single detail. Just had to make it count, make it work. Now he was rambling. I tried to steer him back on course. We can make things go your way. Everyone can walk away from this alive. If I play my cards right, yeah. I know how this works. I relaxed a little. He was calming down. I know that you think this will somehow balance out all the pain that you have had to go through in your life, but it won't. It won't bring Michael back. Another very long pause. He was thinking over what to do. What if I told you it could? This time it was my turn to hesitate. I didn't know how to respond to that. If it could bring back someone I love, do you think it would be worth it? I swallowed. His speech had conviction. He believed what he was saying could be true. Yeah, sure, of course. It would be a miracle. A once-in-a-lifetime shot to change things. Anyone would take that risk, right? Now his voice was shaky again. He needed to convince me. There must be another way, I told him softly. None that I can see. Trust me, I've tried. I've thought long and hard about this moment for years, Dennis. To think of a way out. There isn't. But you have to succeed. So tell me what you need. We can make it happen. He was slipping, pulling away, losing that connection. I needed to reinforce that I was his only shot. It isn't about me. It's about you, Dennis, and what you need. That struck me as an odd thing to say, but I tried to stay in tune with what he was getting at. Okay, sure. I can do whatever you need. Just say the word. It's a bit long. Do you have a pen and paper? I can remember. You're going to want to write this down, Dennis. I shuffled and found one. All right, I'm ready. Tomorrow morning you're going to go down to the coffee shop like you always do. You're going to order your favorite brand of mocha and talk about the weather to the cute barista. Her name is Lucy. You have made small talk before. She's going to ask you if you have the time. You have to tell her no, Dennis. You have to get up, walk away and leave immediately. I felt a nervous sense of unease in the back of my head. How did he know so much about my daily routine? Okay, that's an oddly specific request. You mustn't talk to her, Dennis. You must leave immediately and cross the street to buy a lotto ticket. 65-42-15-23. Repeat that to me. I did, even if I didn't understand why I was doing so. Dennis, one other thing. I was hanging on his words, trying to figure this man out. Everything about the conversation had changed in less than a few seconds. Tell Kristin you love her. My mouth went dry. I heard the discharge of a gun. The SWAT team immediately moved in. I stood up, my palms sweaty. I raced to the front entrance of the bank. The hostages were running out, shrieking and crying as they embraced family. Media swarmed to try and get a glimpse of the killer. But the bullet had been precise. He had blown his face completely off. I stood there looking over his bloody body, confused and frightened by his words. I looked down at his index finger, saw a familiar scarring on it, and felt a shiver run down my spine. I had a scar there as well, from my second tour in Afghanistan, and a tattoo right next to it of the day it happened. They were the same. I left the scene immediately, nerves shot and confused. This had to be an elaborate hoax. But still, the next morning I did exactly as instructed, to the letter. Even that damned lotto number. A few moments later the cashier congratulated me. I had won the scratch-off. What are the odds? The cashier said excitedly. Astronomical, I realized. A once-in-a-lifetime miracle. As I stood there and gazed at the ticket, something flashed before my eyes. Another life, a life I didn't live. I saw myself talking more to the barista, dating her, telling her I wanted to marry her. The life was good. We had a son. We were happy. Then it was dashed to pieces. I saw the crash that took his life. The glass impaled his young body against the side as the vehicle was crushed. I saw my wife spiral into depression and then take her own life, slicing her wrists in the bathroom and waiting for me to find her cold and alone. I saw the impossible abyss about to swallow me whole, take me under until it never stopped strangling every last ounce of hope from my body. And then the moment was gone. I was back in the cashier's stand and staring at the ticket again. I took out my phone and called the officer in charge. "Hey, Chief, sorry to bother you, but did you get an ID back on that body?" "Body? What are you talking about?" "The heist. What happened to the kidnapper?" I am not sure what you are talking about." "What heist?" My mouth went dry. I felt my phone vibrate. Another call was coming in. "Lassiter, is everything okay?" I checked the caller ID. It was Kristen. Tears welled up in my eyes. Yes, everything is fine."